I am back. My name is Vinny K, and I said good evening. It's actually good morning. It was Saturday night, and kind of still is, but it's really Sunday morning technically, 3:30, and I am back here to discuss my favorite band. Happy New Year, by the way. It is February now, but the last time I was here was in December, and I was discussing the album Grace Under Pressure from Rush. And this time, I'd like to talk about the uh, the one that came next, the follow up, and that is Power Windows. Oh yes, one of my favorite Rush albums of all time. Really. Excuse me. So I'd like to talk about this album as I mentioned last time I would, and I'm sorry it took so long. Happy New Year 2022, and here we go. So Rush, Power Windows, the follow-up to Grace Under Pressure. Wow, what? Just off the top of my head, what a change from Grace Under Pressure in terms of like progression. You know, we all think of Rush. We talk about progressive rock, and to me, when you say the word progressive rock, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is Rush. And to me, they really embody that because labels for bands it can mean so many things, and but for Rush, I think it fits perfectly because to me, in the 30 years or so that I followed Rush, each album was pretty much better than the one before it. Better and better. You know, I never seen them go backwards, in my opinion. Other people might debate otherwise, but not me. I really think that whenever something was a certain way on one album, even if I loved it, the next album they fixed certain things or made it better, or certain things came back that you didn't expect, or a certain vocal sound or guitar sound, or you go, whoa, you know. But in this case, we're talking about my golden era with Rush, and that's the '80s, and this was the right in the middle of the '80s, 1985, and probably at the pinnacle of really they're getting to the pinnacle of this period, which began with Signals. Some might argue the second side two of moving pictures, but really in a big way, Signals was the first chapter of this era we're talking about, which is to me, in my mind, Signals, Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, and Hold Your Fire. And by the way, the next video I will be talking about that album, Hold Your Fire, which in my opinion is my favorite of the four. But this one is like right there with it. And coming off of Grace Under Pressure, like I said, just I'm going to talk about everything, all the different aspects, but just generally speaking, light years difference from Grace Under Pressure. Um, because from Signals to Grace Under Pressure, I was talking about before about progression. It was definitely progression. Whatever Signals had going on, they made improvements on the next album and took a left turn. But it was definitely a left turn, but it was like it was a progression in terms of like simple steps, maybe a couple steps above Signals. Well, this wasn't a few steps. This was light years uh, better. Light years better in every freaking way. But we'll be getting to that. I'll be talking about that. First off, being in the '80s, Grace Under Pressure, I really enjoyed a lot. Enjoyed the tour. It was my first Rush concert. That tour, seeing him at Madison Square Garden. Um, and by that time, I was in ninth grade. The first half of ninth grade, which was September to the end of '84, and then into '85. That's when they made this album. That's what they was from February to. I was just reading the tour book, which I have here. Just going over it, and they worked on it from February to about August, September. So I was in ninth grade during that time. Now the thing is, the '80s, no internet, no nothing like that. So I really didn't hear much about what was going on with Rush, especially like you know they weren't that when they were making out an album. You barely, I personally never heard much about it. Generally, only thing I heard about it was a couple things, rumors here and there, uh, maybe a blurb in Circus here and there, but almost nothing. You know, I think the only thing I heard was I had a pen pal because I used to read Circus magazine, which was a rock magazine, and I got into pen pals before the internet. You write to him, and he was a Rush fan. And we would just write back and forth. He lived up in Buffalo, and we would just talk about music. We would write to each other, literally write it on a piece of paper, and I write to each other talking about music. And he used to, being in Buffalo, I guess he had his ear to the ground because it was right across the pond from Toronto with Lake Ontario. And I remember that was like in the summer of '85. Him writing to me and saying, "Yeah, Rush, the new album's going to be called Power Window." And when I read it, his handwriting was kind of hard to read sometimes. I didn't really pick it up right away because I was like, "Power Window, what is he talking about? What's that?" You know. But didn't really hear much. Really hear much of anything. I think I might have heard one blurb in maybe Circus magazine where Getty said something to the effect of, "Well, we want to bring back elements, the elements that got us popular." I think that was the quote. Other than that, didn't know nothing about it. So fast forward, the album was released in October. Now, 1985, I live in Long Island, and one of the biggest events of that year was we got hit with a hurricane, Gloria, in October of 1985. It was a big hurricane. It kicked Long Island's ass and a lot of other places, but we lost power for about a week. It was really it felt like longer than a week because it was miserable. But we got through it, But and one of the things, but we had no power. But one thing is, we were well prepared. We had batteries, and I had my boombox, and my boombox had batteries, so I would always be listening. I still was able to listen to the radio, which was great. So I had WBAB locked onto my radio at this time, and I remember one day during the week that we didn't have power because of Hurricane Gloria. We went to my grandma's house, grandparents' house to check up on them over in Sayville or whatever. We lived in East Northport. And I remember coming back that evening after doing that and flipping on the radio, which was always my natural thing to do. And there was a song on. There was music on, and it was an instrumental bit going on. And I kind of put it on and was doing something, and didn't really know much, about the song or anything. I knew, but I recognized it. I didn't recognize the song at all because it was something I never heard before. But my ears somehow picked up on the sound because I knew the sound of Alex Getty and Neil. It's an unmistakable sound. They have a sound like nobody else. But being that I didn't know the song, it was just like a peculiar thing. My ears were like telling me, "Hey, there's something about the song. What's going on?" Because it was the instrumental bit. And I'm listening, going, "Wait, what is this? What is this?" Listening closer and starting paying attention more. And all of a sudden, the vocals come in, and it's Getty singing, "It's the power of the glory. It's the power of the glory, world of paradise, Cinderella story, on the tumble of the dice, whatever." That whole part. It was the big money. First time. And I was going crazy, like, "Oh my God, this is the new Rush." I haven't heard anything about it. Finally, here's a song, and it was blowing me away. It was just like trying to process it at the moment because I wasn't able to tape it right away, and just kind of listening to it. And I was like, "Well, the first thing jumped out was Getty's voice sounded incredible. He had vocal harmonies going on, which really thick vocal harmonies, which Rush, if you know the history before this, virtually no harmonies in their music. Maybe there's a little bit on the first album, and I think on Kid Gloves they had a little bit in one little part. But this total harmonies, I was going, wow. And then the end part of the song from the guitar, because that's where I picked up on it. It was the guitar solo, and then to the end. So that last verse or chorus or whatever you want to call it, the big money part, is which I still think is the best part of the song. That's the part I heard. blowing me away because I was like, this is totally different. My first thought was this blows away anything I heard on Grace Under Pressure. And they go through that, they get to the end, and that riff that Alex plays, that three sequence, blowing me away because to me, when I heard that, it was like this is the best riff from Alex since Red Barchetta, Limelight. This is right up there with them. If I ever have another video talking about Alex Lifeson's greatest guitar riffs, the Big Money, that riff is right in there, top 10 easily, hands down, absolutely. So that was my first exposure to Power Windows was the Big Money. Now the next day, I was listening to BAB again. I was able to hear the entire song from beginning to end, and I was able to record it on my boombox and all that, and that was really great. So I had that one song that I lived with for a few weeks or so. A couple weeks later, BAB, I gotta tell you, back in the 80s, they were a really great station, and into the 90s as well. Awesome, awesome station when it came to Rush and it came to new bands and new albums coming out and stuff like that. So they had like a preview special, album preview, where I think it was Sunday night or something, where they played new songs from new albums that were coming out, and one of them was Power Windows, and they played a whole bunch of new stuff. They played Grand Designs. That's where I first heard Grand Designs, Manhattan Project, and Marathon. They also played Mystic Rhythms, but for some reason it was on late at night, and back then I wasn't really much of a night owl like I am now. So I kind of missed, I kind of fell asleep when they played Mystic Rhythms. But I heard it the next day. I think I heard it the next day they played it anyway. But Grand Designs, Manhattan Project, Marathon. Oh my God, these songs! It was so, like I said, light years from what I heard before, and especially Marathon. I think the one that stuck with me was Marathon initially, because of that choir sound at the end. Not the sound; it was an actual choir they put on there, 25-piece choir, according to this thing. Neil's Pert's a little blurb in the beginning of the tour book. 25-piece choir at the end of Marathon. That's what jumped out at me. I was like, "Whoa, what the hell is this? It's so big. It's so like I was saying." So my first impression, and then the album came out probably a couple weeks later. I got the. I think initially I bought the record, but it didn't work too well. It was skipping. I got a bad copy, so I switched it for a cassette, and I would end up wearing it out. And but no, the album to me was just light years beyond Grace Under Pressure and Signals. I mean, this was like a whole nother level. I'm talking about the studio recording. They had gotten a new producer, Peter Collins and Jimbo Barton, the engineer, to help them on this. We'll talk about more of that later. I'll talk about more of that later. But at that time, I didn't know what the producer was. All I knew is that the sound of it was just so extraordinary. It was just so like layered and just like multi-dimensional. That's the best description of Power Windows. It's like multi-dimensional. You got the trio there, and then you got all these like keyboards. The keyboard sounding better than everything, sounding better than ever. You could hear everything. Now the thing is, I got the cassette initially, but I'll talk about later on getting the CD because to me, Power Windows is meant to be heard on CD. But we'll talk about more of that. Um, but the songs, yeah. So listen to song. Big Money, like I said, Big Money's incredible. Um, really back to rock. I mean, rock like the last album rocked. It did rock, Grace Under Pressure, but it rocked out in a kind of a futuristic kind of sound, a different sound for them um, compared to the past. There wasn't a whole lot in terms of like specifically with Alex. Like, it wasn't a whole lot of like power chords or anything like that. He was playing more quarterly, which I thought was great. I thought it was like he was doing something unique and different, and it was the style was more that playing these sort of chordal things and like chordal melodies. I thought it was awesome. That's to me the Grace Under Pressure style, where with the big money, now there's a little bit of that still on Power Windows, but the big money was back to power chord, and and hitting a big chord and everything, rock and roll, like more. They're not really traditional. I think Russia's always mess with tradition, but for the want of a better description, a little bit more leaning towards more of a traditional sound, I guess, in a way, in terms of power chords. So Big Money rocking out a big way. Great opening song. It would have become an opening song for the tour of Hold Your Fire later on. Great opener. One of the best songs ever. Um, Great lyrics. I mean, this is the middle of the '80s. Power Windows. You got the theme of power, and what bigger thing about power than money? You know, everybody. It's pretty self-explanatory, but they go through all that. The song is incredible. The video is incredible. It's the first video for the album, um, which is one of the best videos. They look like they're having a blast. You know, Getty's voice sounds incredible. The one thing about the Big Money, like on most albums, but on this one particularly, it sets the tone for the rest of the album. There's things on this song that elements that are on all of the songs, the rest of the songs on the album. Um, the vocals being incredible, the guitars. There's extra keyboards because they brought in a guy Andy Richards to do some extra layers and to give it, like I said, to give it that extra dimensional, multi-dimensional sound. Um, middle of 1985. I mean, it was really something. And this only came out like a year later. So the Grand Designs continues that. Grand Designs is track two, and it's become my favorite song. Whenever I put this on now, the first song I always want to listen to is Grand Designs. I mean, this song just gives me goosebumps. Um, um, so many cool sounds, and the song did take a while for me to kind of get into because it's so different. The lyrics are different, but again, it's got that multi-dimensional vibe to it. I definitely liked it right away. I definitely loved it. I thought it was like it just sounded so cool. It was like and the vocals are amazing. Everything about it just really crisp, um, but very just modern sounding and very '80s, but not in a cheesy way. I think Rush, when they use synthesizers and stuff and sequencers and things like that, they did it in the best possible way. They did it right. I don't think it sounded cheesy. I think they made good use of it. Um, Great song. Now the next two tracks I think are two that I gravitated towards. After Big Money, because I played Big Money when I had it for a few weeks after getting it. I played the hell out of it. So by the time I got the album, I was already kind of used to that song and loved it. But as far as the songs that were fresh to me, Manhattan Project and Marathon were two songs that I gravitated to. When I put this album on, those are the two songs that I wanted to hear that I was really into. Two prong songs that were classics, that are deep cuts in every way. Manhattan Project, the historical piece, which a lot of people think it obviously addresses the atomic bomb and nuclear age and stuff like that. But I think it's really more about the aspect of power, about letting something out of the box, out of the Pandora's box, and never being able to put it back. So that was the whole thing with the '80s and the Cold War and all that. But Neil, as always, uh, he did a lot of research. He said those are very difficult lyrics to write um, because he had to go do a lot of research to make sure that whatever he sang about was accurate. So anyway, but killer track. I love the textures and the keyboards and the way it builds. It has such a great way that it builds, and then it's a slow burner in a way. And it's definitely like nothing Rush ever did before. So for some people that were used to moving pictures, they might not have liked it. I'll get into that again too, of the big debate to have with other Rush fans. But I was all in. I was all in with the freshness of this song because it was like no other song that Rush ever did. The pacing of it, the way the verses build in some simple steps. The song comes in, it's kind of like ominous or whatever, and very thought provoking and very grand. But like I said, each verse kind of builds and builds, and when you get to the chorus, each chorus gets builds and builds until you get to the end, and it comes to a climax. It's such a great climax. Each of these songs, by the way, very grand. The arrangements of compared to anything before with the keyboards again, light years beyond what they did before in terms of layers and different ideas in the songs. He never, even the band itself, never would expected, and that was because of the producer, the great producer Pete. They found a really good producer for this album, whereas the last album they kind of produced themselves, and it was fine. Um, but with this producer, he did gave him a lot of good ideas for things in the song. They according to this, they call them events, little parts in the song, little bits that kind of add to the arrangement, and keep it fresh and keep it unique. So each of the songs has that. Big Money, Grand Designs, all the songs on this album have that extra dimension that gives it the extra dimensional feel to it. So Manhattan Project's no exception. Marathon, the next track, once again, I think is the most personal song. I think for me, and I think for a lot of Rush fans, because it's really about life, the marathon of life that is life. It's not literally. It takes the literal thing, but it applies it metaphorically to life. Um, you can do a lot in a lifetime if you don't burn out too fast. First, you need endurance. First, you gotta last. I mean, that's the biggest line for me in this song. All the lyrics in the song are really awesome, but that's my favorite. The chorus is one of the best choruses I ever heard in my whole life from Rush. It's so tasty, and his vocals are so incredible. I think the best vocals on this album are probably Marathon, Grand Designs, Mystic Rhythms. We'll talk about more. All the songs, his vocals just sound so much better than before. I don't know what he did, but Getty, oh my God, you nailed it on this album with your vocals. They just sound so good. So good. And the bass, oh my God, the bass on Marathon and all these other tracks. He had the wild bass going on, which I think is one of my favorite basses that Getty ever used, especially for the 80s material. I can understand the jazz bass for like the 90s albums after Roll the Bones, but the wild bass on this album and Hold Your Fire, awesome, 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 awesome. I think it fit so good. But great on Big Money and Grand Design. You really hear it. Very funky and punchy. It goes with the drum sound as well. Very punchy and very tasty. And it just like all these galloping phrasings. He was doing all these galloping phrases. And his chops are just blazing. And I think there's just more bass on this album. I think that was the one thing. Um, Grace Under Pressure. I think it had two tracks that did not have bass on it, After Image and Red Sector Ray. Now, it had synth bass on it, which I think sounds cool. But let's face it, Getty, when he's not playing his bass, he's like, like it gets to him. It gets him frustrated. And he took out that frustration on this album. Even a song like Territories, uh, there's not that much bass on it, but he plays the hell out of it. I'll get to that in a bit. But Marathon has to be one of the best bass lines on the album, I think. And he switches it up from verse to verse. He doesn't play exactly the same part. He doesn't phone it in. He kind of like, I think he kind of inverts it on the second verse. But all throughout the song, his bass is just money. The keyboards are money. And then again, I forgot to mention with Manhattan Project, there was like a 35-piece string section on that. And I think there was also strings on this song as well. It sounds like it. Um, I know, and I talk about the choir, the 30-piece choir, 25-piece choir, Marathon. So those two songs, very orchestrated, very big, very just like, oh my God, like skyscraper. If an album is built like a building, well, Power Windows was like a skyscraper, the way it was built. And you can hear everything. Especially if you get the CD. I bought the tape initially and wore the hell out of it. Wore the hell out of it. Um, but eventually, when I got a CD player in '87, I didn't have that many CDs, and this is one of the first ones I bought. Now this is the remaster. I literally just got this a few days ago. My original copy I gave to my brother or whatever. Um, but when I got this on CD, I had a really good system. It was like hearing the album all over again, even though and this is like '87 I got it, so this is a couple years later, and it was like hearing the album for the first time. Uh, if you're gonna listen to this, CD or is the best way, I think. CD or even somehow digitally waken because you get to hear all what's going on, and if you have a good system, oh my god, it's just so incredible. And I had a good system, and I just enjoyed the frick out of it. It just like it just blew me away. But Marathon so good. The choruses, Territory is the next song. Again, a very different song for Rush, but again, talking about world events and stuff like that, and I guess different wars and stuff going on and territories, and the powers that be being very territorial about. Because let's face it, the wars. There's always a pretext for the wars, right? And different things like that. Um, and it's about territory. It's about power. It's about playing both sides. But they talk about that with this. The lyrics are very provocative. My favorite thing about the song, as always, I always gravitate towards the music, and Territories has a very um, different sound for us. Neil Peart playing some bongos on that song, and you got the tribal drums going on in the verses. Great choruses. Bass sounds incredible in the pre-chorus. Rockin' song. It's a little different when you first hear it, especially from compared to the other song. Side one is definitely more like typical Rush in a sense, in terms of like catchy choruses and catchy verses and keyboards and things like that. But Territories, it's not like nothing you ever heard before from Rush, really. But when you hear it a lot, it's an acquired taste, I guess, and it catches up with you once you get to know that song. And again, you hear it on a good system on CD. Sounds great. It sounds so incredible. Getty's voice is really good. The keys in the song, they changed different keys compared to last album too. So I think that kind of gives the album a fresh feel as well. Um, so Territories, great bass, great drums. Alex. Some of these songs, it's not like a guitar album in the sense like Moving Pictures or 2012 where he's dominating in terms of the overall sound, but his guitar sound is pretty strong, and you can hear it. You can hear everything, the guitars and the keyboards. It's very well balanced. The arrangements are not stepping on each other. Some people would say that this album is overproduced or something. I don't think it's overproduced at all. I think it's produced as much as it should be. Pulling out all the stops. But the arrangement, it's all about the arrangement. You could have keyboards and guitar, like in Marathon when Alex is doing one of his best guitar solos I think he's ever done. Um, the keyboards lay low. They play some lower notes, so when he's up high, so they're not stepping on each other. So it's just arrangements. And I think the keyboards sound really good on this album. They kind of like, I always thought like, say like a Marathon or something, it was kind of like a throwback to Signals in a way, how the thickness of the keyboards. But with Jimbo Barton and the way they produced this album, you're able to hear everything. Whereas on Signals, you heard the keyboards, but maybe the guitar was kind of sounding like it was in the background. Here, everything is like right there. It's almost like you're in the room with them, and you can hear everything. I'm sorry, I sound like a broken record, but that's what I love about this and Hold Your Fire is you can hear everything. You know, such a well produced thing. But the keyboard's really good. Middletown Dreams is another song with great keyboards. Um, Getty's used his selection of sounds for the patches or whatever are very well selected. But you know, Just because there's a lot of keyboard doesn't mean that the guitar, the bass, the drums, the trio aspect of Rush isn't present. It's very much present on this album. It's there. It's very much there on each song. You know, you can still, obviously with Presto and Roll the Bones, they stripped it down a lot, but it's there. The trio's in there, and on Middletown Dreams, it's definitely well done. You know, the guitar, bass, drums aspect of Rush. You know, stripping it down because Middletown Dreams is it's another slow burner that kind of builds and builds and builds, and it starts out very pastel, very texture with Alex, but it's, you know, good arpeggios. Alex's arpeggios are better than anybody's, by the way. His guitar arpeggios, a lot of that on this song and the next song. And Getty, you know, gives a lot of space. I think that's the thing about Alex on this album. I wanted to continue with, where he's not being very flashy or dominant. He's giving a lot of space for the other instruments, for the bass and the keyboards to shine, and Neil as well. And Middletown Dream is a perfect example. Even though Alex he does a ripping solo, it's a quick little solo in the song, but it's a ripping solo. But the rest of the song is pretty much not filler. I hate when people say it's being filler. No, he's very busy actually, but he's giving a lot of space for getting his vocals and the arrangement. You know, knowing when not to play to make, and he does it very effective on Middletown Dream. Great lyrics. One of my favorite lyrics too. It's another one. It's kind of like Subdivisions Part Two in a way, because it's you know, Subdivisions talks about living in the suburbs. This town talks about living in the suburbs, um, and having Middletown dream. Because Middletown, it's kind of like Joe Town. You know, some towns, some little town somewhere, or we're big or small, and having dreams about being elsewhere. It's a theme that's in a lot of his songs. Analog Kid, you know, dreaming of the future, thinking about what is it going to be like. You know, we all go through that. But Middletown Dreams, there's a lot of examples in there. Middle aged Madonna, the boy and his guitar, that'd be me. So there's something for everybody, and that's it just in a given song. But it's all about the dreams, which I love. Any song about dreams, I'm all in because dreams is a big love dreams. Next song, Emotion Detector. After Grand Design, I would say this is probably my favorite song after many years of living with this album. Probably because they didn't play it live, the song ends up being a little more special. Kind of, I wish they played it live, but Emotion Detector is such a great song. Oh my God, one of the best guitar solo, instrumental bit. Even though it's a guitar solo, you know, it's right up there with Free Will and all the best of them. I mean, Getty's ripping on the bass when we get to that. But again, the song kind of is a little bit of a slow burner. The intro is so gorgeous. It's like instrumentally, it's like a little instrumental in the beginning for a few minutes, and it's so gorgeous. If you ever listen to the demos too, that's another thing. The demos are on YouTube. You can find them. Like all this stuff is all laid out in the demos. Even though they had Andy Richards come in and do all the extra stuff, a lot of the stuff is pretty much Rush, you know. Uh, and their demos, like if that was the album, I would have been like, okay, that's cool, you know. Then they go and redo it and then really refine it, and that's what you get here. But Emotion Detector, very thick with the keyboards, but Alex's guitars are very busy with the arpeggios during the verses, and then ripping instrumental guitar solo with all three guys. It's one of those like just galloping and just off to the races like Free Will or something. Um, the chorus is da 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 da. I love that riff. Da 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 da. It's so catchy and memorable and so strong. You know, the one thing about this album compared to Grace Under Pressure, their confidence level. That's another thing, is their confidence level. They got their swagger back, you know, because they were experimenting on Signals and Grace on purpose and searching for something. And I think when they got to this album, they arrived to a large degree with the sound and the song, the feeling really a lot more confident about the song. You can hear it right away. Like, oh, this is, that's where I say again, Rush is a true progressive rock band because each album they are consciously out to better themselves. Like we want to, that last album was pretty good, but we want to bury that album. I don't care if it's Moving Pictures, whatever album. We're gonna make a better album, man. We got better songs. You thought that was the best thing? No, we got another song that's better. I know it's in there, and that's what they strive for. But this album, you can tell that whatever they were searching for in the previous two, they found it. They were, oh yeah, this is it. Like when I could see when they were working on the song, I was like, dude, we got it going on here. We got some good stuff. Wait until they hear this, kind of thing. Um, totally, and you feel that in all the songs. And then the closer, Mystic Rhythms, one of the greatest closers of all time. Again, my first time hearing it, it's like nothing else you ever heard. It's like no other Rush song. But now, after 30 years of being around, or 40 years, or whatever, uh, it's part of their catalog. It's a classic. Mystic Rhythms is such a classic, and that video is so mesmerizing. And seeing Getty with his ponytail the first time, it was kind of not that image is a big thing with me and Rush, and the hairstyles or whatever, but it was a little bit jarring. I'll be honest. Seeing Getty with his now he kind of jokes about it being like he had a raccoon on his head or something, but not a big deal. But the video for Mystic Rhythms, really cool seeing Neil playing that epic, iconic drum part. According to the 12 book, he brought in Indian drums and African drums and sampled them and stuff like that in order to create that layered, epic, just mesmerizing drum part that he comes up with. I can't emulate it with my mouth, but you know what I'm talking about, Rush fans. Mystic Rhythms, it's unmistakable, and it's a great closer because the rest of the album is pretty like, even with some of the slow burners, like there's so much energy with this album. It's very extroverted. It's very like, power windows, yeah, check it out, guys. Mr. Rhythms, on the other hand, is a little more chilled, a little more laid back. And yet, the layers, again, Getty's selection of sounds on Mystic Rhythms, taking advantage of taking the best keyboards in his mind. And I pretty much, whatever he's using, in my mind, is the best. It's the best of what's out there. If you're gonna use it on a Rush album, it's gotta be the best keyboards that's out there. Yeah, and our Mystic Rhythms is no exception. You hear it there. His keyboards are so good, and then the bass is like, the first verse or so is tons of keyboard, and then you get to the second verse, and it's bass drum guitar. Electronic drums. I don't care, but it's pretty stripped down and beautiful. I love the second verse. It's my favorite part of the song. Uh, we sometimes see a window or a glimpse of what's beyond that whole part. The video is really cool, kind of great video. Sometimes videos are hit and miss, but Mystic Rhythms, I thought the video nails it. But great vocals again, very great. The melodies on this album, better melodies than before. Everything about this album is better. Better melodies, the bass lines are better, the sound is better, the drum sounds better. And Mystic Rhythms, his vocals, one of his best ever. Best vocal performances ever. Geddy Lee. I mean, he really nailed it. And it's such a great closer. The lyrics are very evocative and provocative, as always, from Neil. Uh, I think it's just images, great images to me. I don't, you know, Mystic Rhythms, thinking about this, like the unknown, which I'm all about. I'm into paranormal and different things like that, or the unknown things in the world. We don't know everything. The more questions, more things we think about, more things are explained. I'm paraphrasing lyrics, but it's just thinking about the unknown and thinking about what if. But great bass. The guitar in the song is very unique. The way Alex plays his little acoustic part, strumming, and again, he's letting the other guys shine. He's knowing when not to play, and I still think Alex parts are awesome on this song, even though he's not sitting there wailing out or whatever. But it's more chilled out. There's nothing wrong being chilled out. You know, great closer, one of the best closers in Rush's career. Uh, so that's the songs. 8 songs, a lot going on. Overall, it's just a very thick album, but not like you know, uh, letting the instruments, all the instruments get to breathe, all the instruments get to be heard really well. The lyrics, the vocals, you can hear everything. You put on the headphones, or whatever, you get a good system. Such a great deep album, but the more you listen to it, the better it is. So that my initial thought of it is what you just heard, everything you're talking about. When it first came out, it just blew me away. Now the thing about it, though, I loved it. I was all in. I still am to this day. I still will defend it to the day I die. I'll always defend Power Windows. But at the time, I think at the time, a lot of my friends who were fans of Rush supposedly didn't like it. Were not on board right away. They were like, what the frig, man?" For whatever reason. Now, I don't remember ever hearing any big flack in terms, at least my musician friends. I know Grace Under Pressure, I might have had one or two that didn't get it. Sometimes fans don't get it. And I talked about this last time too. That when each band you have out there, there's the core fans like me. I discovered that there are different types of fans. There's core fans, hardcore fans, loyal fans that follow each album, open-minded, into it, on board. And then you have some that maybe jump on the bandwagon when the band's popular because it's a cool thing to do. And then you got bands that maybe were kind of core fans, or thought they were. And then the band made an album and they weren't into it and they kind of lost interest and whatever. Well, that's what I'm talking about here. Some of my musician friends were like that. They kind of, when it came to Power Windows, that's when I first really started to have debates with them about this album. I'm like, dude, because I understood, I was all in about how much better this album sounds and how much, and to them, I guess they were going back and were into the old material, which is fine. I understand that, and realizing how great the '70s was. I'll talk about those albums too, and talk about how great they are. But for them, they were kind of stuck with them, like thinking like they should be doing Hemispheres or Farewell to Kings, like whatever they were doing then, they should be doing now. And my whole thing was, well, they already did that. Whatever they did before, they already did that. This is 1985. This isn't 1977, 78, whatever. This is 1985. This is the 80s. Power Windows reflects the 80s. I mean, why on earth would they make an album that sounds like Farewell to Kings or something, And hey there, I don't know who you are, but hello there if you're listening. But we had I remember just initially, and anyway, having major debates with some of my fellow fans. Now, what's funny about Grace Under Pressure is there were a lot of people who didn't like it initially, but that wound up being in their favorite album. I remember one of the guys I would have debates with about Power Windows. I remember him once saying, "Yeah, my least favorite album of Rush at that time were Grace Under Pressure and Power Windows," and I was able to convince him, play the album for him, Grace Under Pressure, and make him change his. I didn't force him, but I played it for him, and he was able after a while to say, "You know what? This is my favorite album. My favorite album." Wasn't able to really change his mind on Power Windows, which I thought was interesting. Which I thought was weird because he was a bass player, and as far as I'm concerned, Power Windows has some of Geddy's best bass lines ever. Geddy would probably admit that. I know Geddy is proud of this album. And when people ask what's your favorite Rush album to Geddy, he'll say something like, well, 2112, Permanent Wave, Moving Pictures, and he'll say Power Windows. He always says that. I've heard him say it several times in interviews. Because of the bass. The bass is so good on this album. So yeah, different mixed feelings with this album. This is the first time I used to get a lot of mixed feelings with other fans. I was all on board. have been since then, and still to this day. Even when I get away from it from a while, which I do from time to time, and I come back to it, I'm like, yeah, it actually sounds better. When you get away from it and come back, you hear more of. I hear more of how great it is. You know. Um, so mixed feelings about the album when it came out. Although some of the fans, I think later on would come back and like, yeah, it's great. Whereas others, um, not so much. So it depends. But I know, but there are a lot of fans like me who are loyal, a little more loyal and a little more on board with Power Windows. I think it's a very popular album. It's mixed. There's some people who are like me, who are on board, and others who are a little more like into whatever pre-signals and stuff like that. You know, there's always going to be that. So what else? Just thinking about, like I said, the interviews. Like I said, Getty, Alex Neil. As far as what I heard, they were proud of this album. They felt very confident. I know Getty felt like it was an arrival album. And what else? The videos were really good. I talked about the videos. The videos are great. Um, the tour is really awesome. This is my second show. Now, the tour began in 85, late 85, and went into 86, I think, all the way to like June or something. We in New York didn't get to see them until April, so that was a few months later. Album came out in October. We didn't get it 6, 7 months later. But great tour. Even though Grace Under Pressure was my first time seeing Rush, the second time for Power Windows I thought was better. The set list was better. They did Limelight. They did the Trees. I think the balance of old and new was a little bit better. They learned from the last tour. We got to to mix in a little bit more of the old songs, a little bit better. Overture, Temples and Earrings, and not just Temples and Earrings. Um, you know, which I understand on Grace Under Pressure. Look, they were into Grace Under Pressure. They played a lot of moving pictures on that album, but they kind of they totally skipped Hemisphere. So for Power Windows tour, they didn't do that. They played something from pretty much just about every album except Fly By Night and Crest of Steel. Uh, and the set list order was really, really good. Spirit of Radio, into Limelight, into Big Money, and then Big Money. I mean, the first three songs were just really. Look at the set list for Power Windows. It opened up with a bang, you know. I remember the National Coliseum, April 4th. It's on YouTube too now. Standing room only, man. It was standing room only. Everybody was singing along. It was a Friday night, I remember. I was 16. So I thought out of the first couple times that I saw them, that was the better Rush concert. In terms of the set list, in terms of the audience being just so into it and singing along. It was just a great night. Great, great night. Um, Great tour. And again, we didn't have any internet. The thing about it, we didn't have any internet. So I really didn't get to hear what the live songs sounded like unless you went to the concert. Because Show of Hands didn't come out to 89 or something. That was a long time that, because the only live show that they had that was up to date was the Grace Under Pressure tour, I think it just came out on VHS, VHS or whatever. So go and see them live and hearing these songs live. 'Cause that's the thing with Power Windows. I was talking about all these new layers and stuff, all the new multi dimensions of this album. Well, I remember when it first came out on Rockline. One of the fans being like, "Well, how are you going to do these songs live when you got the choir sounds and string sounds?" And this is the first time that Getty said they started using this thing called the emulator, sampling things, where they got a guy behind the stage, Jack Secret, putting floppy disks into this thing. It's a whole spiel that they had to do to reproduce the album, and I think initially on the tour too, when they started the tour, they had some issues and trying to get the bugs out and getting used to this new thing, um, where they were kind of screwing it up a little bit. But by the time we saw them in April, there was none of that. They had it down. But hearing the songs live, they sounded awesome. Whatever they did with the emulators and stuff like that, they got it down, and they make it look easy, Alex and Getty. So great tour and Power Windows. That's about it. If I ever think about more, I'll come back to it, of course. But I had a great experience with Power Windows. I thought it was, like I said, a light years jump from the previous two albums. Rush was back in terms of their swagger, their confidence. Uh, Even though I had some other fellow fans that felt differently, in my mind, Rush was awesome. They were doing awesome, and especially a couple years later, when I got the album on CD, I realized, yeah, Power Windows is the real deal. I don't want to hear nothing about it. This album's incredible. But that's about it. Yeah, great album. So that's about it, guys. I just want to talk about my journey with Rush and my experience with Power Windows. I'm a big fan. A lot of people back then, like I said, had mixed feelings, and maybe to this day, I heard someone the other day. I was listening to someone. They said that they thought Power Windows was like was a low point in Rush's career, like where they jumped shark. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about, pal. Because to me, it was one of the heights, the highlights of the '80s. To me, with the '80s, this album and Hold Your Fire are the pinnacle for me, artistically. Commercially, I don't care like what if moving pictures sold more or singles sold more. These two albums sound better. I mean, they just the band is better. There's so much more going on. I don't know. I can go on and on. But that next album, Hold Your Fire, I'll be talking about next very, very soon. I'm anxious to get to that video ASAP. So, especially because I'm doing this video now after the last video I did was in December, so I skipped a month and was away for a while. So I like to get that video out along with this one, so that so I'm back on it in terms of doing these YouTube discussion videos. So next up will be Hold Your Fire. I hope you enjoyed this discussion and everything like that. If you got any comments about your experience with Power Windows and your opinions about it, that's fine. Whatever you disagree with me, that's fine. If you agree with me, that's fine. It's all good. What are your favorite songs on Power Windows? What's your experience? What is your journey? What was it like for you to hear Power Windows for the first time? Whether it was when it came out or if it was later on, if you're a fan that got into Rush later and you went back and retraced their steps and got back into their earlier stuff. What's your vibe with Power Windows? Tell me what you think. Whenever you get to this, I don't care if it's now or 10 years later, when this video is still on YouTube, let me know. So have a good evening, good morning, or good evening, rest of your weekend, and I will talk to y'all later. Cheers.